Yo, what's good, y'all? It's your boy Zoetic, and you tuned into another episode of my collection.
In the cut like C-sections. Breaking records, I ain't talking about my collection.
Alright, so the first thing that I want to get into here, you guys know how I do it. I'm gonna start off with a CD. Alright, the first thing I got here is John Coltrane, I Love Supreme. I mean, this is just, again, like a lot of the stuff that I have in this collection, a lot of things that I'm a fan of, a lot of things that I admire, draw inspiration from. Just some of the greatest stuff of all time. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I Love Supreme. I mean, what hasn't been said about an album like this? You know, John Coltrane, one of the most innovative jazz artists we ever saw in history, came up under Miles and, just studying and pushing boundaries of jazz. That was the whole kind of idea of what Miles was about. So John kind of fit perfectly into that mold, and after he left, did his own thing to the biggest extent. I just when you listen to music like this is more of like a spiritual experience, a spiritual journey. These instruments and the way that they play these notes and even just the spacing, when they're not playing notes. I mean, this just takes you to another dimension. It takes you to another existence of being. This is the type of music that when you listen to, you can't help but be transported into another dimension. So, whenever you're feeling like you need a readjustment in your life, just throw on a Love Supreme, man, and be recalibrated with what's going on in your spiritual journey. You know what I'm saying? All right, next up, I want to talk about this book right here. This is Jay-Z's Decoded right here. I think this came out in 2011, 2012, something like that. 2010, this came out. And this is basically just a big book of lyric breakdowns of Jay's, some of Jay's most prolific writing. He really breaks down and describes where a lot of his bars, a lot of his stories, a lot of his perspectives came from. Growing up on the streets of Brooklyn and just coming up in the whole New York scene and just his whole journey, things that he saw growing up, his era, his generation. He does a really good job of not just putting that into his music, but just painting it in a great way. I mean, there's not much that I could say more about Jay. You know what I mean? He's one of the greatest rappers of all time and one of the greatest discographies of all time. And this book right here is just such a great breakdown and understanding of what really went into his lyrics. And there's a lot of pictures and stuff too. So stuff that he's describing and things that he's talking about, stories that he's painting, specific things like, what was going on in music, certain artists, certain sports references, certain fashion references. I mean, it really just captures the listener and puts them into a different time. It's like a time capsule. And this is a really good documentation of just how deep his lyrics are and how important the lyrics are. I think whenever we're listening to songs, we're listening to hits in particular, we're just liking it because it's a great song. But at the end of the day, great artists are able to put messages in those great songs, and I think Jay does a great job of that. And this book right here was just such a great insight into his lyrics and his songwriting process. Even though he doesn't physically write pen to paper, he's still writing songs, and the process that he does to get to the point where you hear it on the record is really, really cool. I think it changed the way a lot of rappers rapped and made music, maybe not for the better. I think people after that started especially the Lil Wayne era after that, people really thought that they could just come off the top and freestyle. And that's not really what they were doing. They were writing, but they were writing in their head, and they changed the way that people write lyrics, the way that people make music. And to me, that is the true definition of great artists, for better or for worse, right? Great book right here, Jay-Z Decoded. All right, the next thing I want to talk about right here is a documentary that I've had for a long time. I think this came out around the same time, 2012. This is The Art of Rap, From Nothing to Something. This is Ice-T's documentary that he put out a few years back, and he's just pretty much just sitting with some of the greatest MCs of all time, and really just more so of what I talked about with the Jay-Z Decoded album. He's really getting into the craft and the art of writing rhymes and rapping and just really how much goes into rapping. You know, I think people tend to look down at rapping because it's kind of the easiest way to jump into music. But, you know, to be really great MC, to be somebody who impacts the genre, to be somebody who is heralded as a great, you know, you need to do something different, and you need to tell stories that stick with people, that people can relate to, that people can see and visualize. And that's really what this documentary really delves into right here, is just the lyrics and the way that people put together word puzzles to create these classic hip-hop tracks and soundtracks to generations and different kind of experiences that people go through, especially, you know, people of color, you know, and how we created this genre from nothing, you know, from nothing to something. That it's in the title of the documentary, you know, that's really what we did. So it's really interesting just to see the process of what these greats went through to make this incredible classic generation defining music. A documentary I would highly recommend to anybody who hasn't seen it. And also, if you have seen it, because it's been a little while, you know, take a look back, because this thing, replay value is off the charts. I've seen this thing 100 times, and it's inspiring to me every single time. So shout out to Ice-T, the OG, From Nothing to Something, the art of rap. All right, the next thing I want to talk about, I want to dip into my record collection. So check this out. First up, we got Ghostface, Killah, Supreme Clientele. Again, you know, some of the greatest hip-hop music, rap music we've ever heard. Probably top 3 Wu-Tang projects. What more is there to say about an album like this, man? Ghostface, he's one of my favorite rappers of all time. His discography is just so vast and so long and just filled with such classics after classics. I mean, he's kept his name relevant through, you know, the past 30 years, and the styles and the rapping styles and the beat styles that have kind of evolved into what's popular right now with, you know, the whole Griselda, Rock Marcy, and everything that's going on in the underground right now. I think it all stems from what Wu-Tang did and what Wu-Tang still does, actually. You know, it's kind of crazy that I think back then when they first came out, you couldn't have imagined that 30 years later there would still be forces and just impactful on this culture still. I mean, what they did was just so timeless, and it created so much opportunity for them to continue what they're doing. I mean, the Raekwon and Ghostface verses that happened a couple months ago, that was one of the greatest verses ever, because it was just, you know, these two guys who have known each other forever and playing their legendary discography, man. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. I can't think that as an artist, what more could you want than something like that, you know? Supreme Clientele, I mean, just classic right here. I mean, how many classic records are on here? I mean, Nutmeg, One, Ghost Dini, Apollo Kids, Cherchez La Ghost. I mean, Mighty Healthy. It's ridiculous, you know. And to think that this kind of came during a period when, you know, mainstream stuff was really booming, and the separation between indie and mainstream. These guys were able to do a form of traditional hip-hop that I think was kind of being pushed out at the time. So I think this came at a really important time and really, like I said, just evolved the genre and evolved the style of what it could be. Absolute 5 mic classic, just solidifies Ghostface as one of the greatest discographies of all time, one of the greatest rappers of all time, one of the greatest personalities that hip-hop has ever seen. Not much more can be said about Ghostface, man. So, Supreme Clientele, if you haven't heard this, please do your Googles, please do your homework, because this is one of the greatest, man, of all time, Ghostface. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is another record that I got right here. This is Mary J. Blige, What's the 411? I mean, again, just more excellence, recording, music excellence, just cultural significance, impactful. You know, this is what you're talking about when you're talking about things that are in my collection, you know what I'm saying? And What's the 411 fits that criteria and more. I mean, just like I said, some of the most greatest recorded music of all time. This is an album that my mom had in heavy rotation when I was really young as a child. You know, this came out in 92. So, you know, this is just soundtrack to my life type of music right here. Nothing but classic stuff on here. This came through and just changed the game. I mean, not much more that I could say that's been said about an album like this, of this caliber, you know. I mean, the queen of hip-hop soul, Mary J. Blige, man, she came through, and with the help of Puff and all the other producers and writers on this album, really just carved out a lane that didn't exist at this time, as far as just, you know, hip-hop beats and soulful singing, something that you know, the older folks could get down with, but something that was fresh and new for the younger folks. Recently, I just watched the Mary J. Blige documentary that she put out on Amazon Prime, where it was kind of you know, more so focused on the My Life album. Really incredible stuff, man. I mean, Mary's story is just absolutely incredible. One of the greatest artists of all time, man. I mean, I'm so thankful to be so familiar with her catalog, because like I said, she's one of my mom's favorites. So growing up, you know, a birthday or Mother's Day comes around, you know, we always buying her the whatever new Mary J. Blige album came out. So I'm very familiar with her discography, man. I'm just thankful that I was raised to hearing such a great voice like hers, and her story and her music, and just how important she is to the culture, to hip-hop, to R&B, and, you know, I can't be more thankful for stuff like that. So Mary J. Blige, what's the 411? This is the type of stuff, that timeless music. You can listen to this. I'll probably be listening to this to the end of my days. You know, this is music right here that will stick with me forever, that will stick with the culture forever, and makes an impact that can't even be expressed in just a little YouTube video that I'm doing, you know. So hats off, salute to her, man, one of the greatest of all time. Thank y'all so much for tuning in, man. This has been a cool journey. I enjoyed going through my collection for y'all, so tune into the next episode. Till then, catch y'all on the flip side. Peace.